he's doing it right now. You want to unhook your, I don't know if it's the speaker.
Is there a sign-up sheet to speak?
No,
for the-
we don't have enough pens and stuff, so if you just, when the budget, when the public hearing happens, I think you just state your name and address, and that will take it down.
Thank you.
At least that's what we did earlier. Right? Somebody
Would it be okay to do the Pledge of Allegiance?
Well, you don't do that for the public hearing yet.
Okay.
He's almost there.
Well, we have quorum, maybe we just skip the Skype for Councilor Barbell, if that's what's causing the problem.
Prefer to have a YouTube live stream than
Yeah,
Barbell.
right. Or bring my little device for Councilor Barbell in that I use. Yeah, we don't have. Can we look at it?
folks, but sure.
Brody. How are you doing?
I'm gonna be late for work today.
It's not looking good, huh?
I was late last week.
Really?
It's for a lot of my customers.
Do they wait for you?
Yeah, well, I go online and everything happens.
Yeah.
With bears coming from surgeons.
Who's coming in?
Bidders?
Bears from surgeons. We're doing some food.
sorry, trying to give you your distance, I'm sorry.
Are we letting things for recording?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's a public meeting. I mean, it is supposed to be coming through live stream, but, yep, it's a public meeting. This is a public place. Is this room recorded? Yes. Yeah, it should be all coming in through YouTube. That's what they're trying to fix here. We've got a counselor coming in by Skype, and we're trying to make sure everything is streamed and recording. And
Ira, can you hear me? Still can't hear you. I think you got a problem with your microphone, Ira.
Oh, I got you.
I think Ira's got a problem with the microphone, but at least it looks like he can hear us.
does somebody want to try and patch him through maybe by cell phone? We've done that with Rochelle in the past.
There's no audio on YouTube.
You got a telephone number for him?
No.
Jeff, do you have a telephone number for Ira?
Save the sound.
Hmm?
Ethan, do you see the YouTube on your phone?
Yeah, it's playing.
Okay, let's go in. I was out, he's off the island. Start your public hearing, please.
Oh, maybe if they're down themselves, my microphone is terrible. Can maybe you'll do that? Put them on speakerphone by your microphone? Yeah. And we got his video here, and I think he can see us, so.
You ready to start the public hearing?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, let's begin the public hearing. The City of Plattsburgh is holding a public hearing to hear public comment on proposed local law P4, a local law amending Chapter 300 subdivision of land and Chapter 360 zoning of the City Code of the City of Plattsburgh to provide exemptions for city projects. Any interested parties, please come forward and state your name and address.
Jeff, you're gonna have to mute that until he wants to speak.
Good evening. If you don't know, my name is Ron Nolland. I'm chairman of the zoning board for the city of Plattsburgh. I'm here regarding law P4 for 2020, obviously. And please note that these comments are not only from me as a private citizen, but also as chair of the zoning board of appeals for the city of Plattsburgh. I'm not speaking for the entire board, but this should still be considered as official comments from the chairman of the zoning board. This proposed change in the city zoning code is more than alarming to me. It goes against the most basic concepts of zoning and planning processes, which I have held sacred for over 21 years as a member of the ZBA, most of which has been as the chair. As an aside, my time serving this community as a volunteer on the ZBA is equal to the total combined years of service of all of the councilors in the mayor. 21 years, 5 months. Totaled them up. The all-volunteer zoning and planning boards are meant to be independent and free from any political influence. Their mission is to protect the quality of life for this community and encourage responsible growth, while understanding that some properties with special or different conditions may be entitled to some relief from the code. The not easy part of this task is the balancing of individual property owners' rights with the good of the community. The process depends on the proven restrictions in the code to safeguard against the overdevelopment and density that will impact the quality of life and property values for everyone. This proposed law bypasses every protection the process was designed to provide for the community and property owners. It grants broad, sweeping powers to the council and other city departments to allow development without any of the checks and balances provided by independent boards functioning outside of political influence. It creates a system where granting of political favors can become more important than the quality of life the city officials are supposed to foster. I understand that this proposed law may be technically legal. That does not make it right. The legal precedent might be there for similar laws, but they are meant to be used for public works projects still owned by the city, not for development projects favored by a current administration. This will affect future projects such as Harborside, and if successful at annexing property from the town, city officials will be able to do as they wish, subdividing and allowing restriction-free development of their chosen clients. Meanwhile, the developers who have built the city under the current zoning laws and new developers wishing to build will be at a distinct disadvantage, having to follow all of those pesky rules that the city doesn't have to. A prime example of the haves and have-nots, if ever there was one. Regarding the present application from the city on behalf of Prime, we have been assured that this application will not qualify for exemption under this law. That is because the Durkee Street application is presently before the boards, predating the new rules. If it eventually does not get approval, the application is finished and a new, different application can be provided to be processed this way. The city and Prime may also be tired of the pace of the process so far and could pull the present application and then start a new one once you pass this law. I am not convinced that the project could not be reapplied for under new guidelines. An idea. Perhaps an amendment to the law stating that no DRI or Durkee Street projects, present or future, could be exempted under this law would maybe allay the fears for some of us. It would not help for other future projects, and that is at least as critical an issue as the Prime project. Although I would like to see this new law rejected by the council, I assume that this public hearing will do nothing to change your mind about passing it and grabbing even more power and influence than you presently have. I am extremely concerned about the effect on the future of this city and its citizens. I am also worried, and extremely worried, frankly, about the effect it will have on the planning and zoning boards.
Mr. Nolan?
Who will want to serve on a volunteer board, getting training every year and putting in their own time, trying to enforce zoning laws on others as the city avoids the process completely?
Mr. Nolan, time's up.
That's okay, I'm going to keep going. Applicants will constantly be using the precedents created by the city to request the same treatment by the boards for their private projects. Zoning laws will become mere guidelines that will not be followed for the slightest reasons. Zoning boards and planning boards will become more and more powerless. All of this because it's easier for the council and others to skip the hard part and do what they want without consideration for its effect. Hopefully, the next administration will be able to reverse this law. And finally, to paraphrase Bob Dylan, you got a lot of nerve to say you are a friend. You just want to be the side that's winning.
Any other individuals like to please come address the council?
Good evening. I'm Rosemary Redmond. I am a resident of the city, and I agree with everything Ron just said, and I support everything he just said. I was doing a little research, obviously not as much as he did, and I'm curious why we're using a local code as opposed to the charter, because this is provided for in the charter that we have a zoning and a planning board, and if it should be voted on by the general population to amend the charter. That might delay this, but I have to wonder if that's what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other individuals like to please come address the council? State your name and address.
My name's Kurt Burbich. I live at 185 Cornelia. So I'm an environmental planner. I've got about 2 decades of environmental planning experience at municipal and regional level, as well as teaching environmental planning. There are legitimate reasons for local immunity to municipal zoning, things like regular maintenance, projects for health and well-being and safety. And zoning sometimes might prove an obstacle to carrying those out in a timely way. But blanket immunity with no limitations poses some risks. There should be limitations and checks and balances to protect from abuse by future councils. And we don't know the council that will be in place in 2030 or 2040 or 2050, and we don't know the kinds of issues and proposals and decisions or projects that they may be faced with. There are locations and projects in the community of such public importance that our independent boards, like the Planning and Zoning Board, and the community at large, deserve the right to weigh in and provide oversight. Blanket immunity may preclude that oversight and pave the way for a future council to abuse a policy that is, with all good intentions, established today. I'll quickly enumerate some of the problems with the current proposed ordinance and highlight some very simple solutions. First, the current proposed ordinance does not limit immunity to any particular geographic areas. It can be used anywhere. I urge the council to consider something like an immunity overlay zone that would designate specific locations within the community that might be immune to the zoning code and others that may not. Immunity would apply in some locations, giving quick and easy access to make the necessary infrastructure improvements for health, safety, and well-being. But in places outside the overlay zone, standard operating procedures would apply. No project would be prohibited, but those outside the geographic overlay would require standard involvement from planning and zoning. Second, the ordinance doesn't define the types of projects that may receive immunity. I urge the council to list the types of projects to be included, such as regular maintenance to streets and sidewalks and so on and so forth. Projects that fall outside these categories would still be allowable, but they would go through the standard review process. Third, the ordinance doesn't declare the size of the project or the scope of the project that may be included and receive immunity. The council could determine whether immunity applies for projects over a certain square footage or a certain dollar value. Projects that meet the criteria would be immune from zoning, and those that don't would not be. Each of these solutions, limiting immunity based on geographic area, type of project, or size of project, would allow them all to continue, but some would receive exemption and be accelerated. Additionally, the proposed ordinance should provide guidance to the Common Council about how to determine whether to seek Planning and Zoning Board guidance. The 9-point test proposed by the Department of State may be that guide. The test asks 9 questions, which push a council to reflect on the public benefit and impacts of exempting an action. These questions could be used to determine whether the council should seek guidance from planning and zoning. This addition to the ordinance protects the council from claims of bias and arbitrary application of the exemption, and it eliminates the pressure to seek or not seek zoning and planning approval by providing a bright line signal to the council. Next, the proposed policy does not define whether or not the zoning exemption applies to public-private partnerships, whether or not the exemption applies to a project in which the city is a co-applicant with a private developer. The Durkee Street project at this point is exempt, I understand that, but let's just use it as an example. If that project came up after this ordinance were implemented, would the Durkee Street project with a co-applicant, the city, and a private developer, would the city be able to pass through the exemption to that private partner? Next, the proposed policy doesn't define where in the development process the zoning exemption occurs and who's responsible for overseeing that process. What kind of information is needed in order to see if the zoning exemption applies? Is a back of the napkin sketch plan good enough, or a site plan? Does that fall to the building inspector, or to the community development office, or to the council, or to the mayor? The policy is silent on these issues.
Mr. Gerber, your time's almost up.
I'll end with 3 final thoughts. First, with a comprehensive plan process underway, Why not pump the brakes on this proposal now and let a municipal exemption to zoning be written into a new comprehensive plan? You've established a committee that's doing planning. They're considering zoning revisions, and you can very easily wait for that process to play out with all of the public involvement that goes along with it.
Mr. Grupich,
Yes.
time's up.
Second, PUDs especially should not receive the blanket exemption. There's a very small number of locations in the community where PUDs can be constructed that are currently under city ownership. They're of vital significance to the city.
If everyone is going to speak over their time limit, everyone will not get a chance to speak. I want to hear from everyone that's here to speak on this issue.
Yes, your time's up, Mr. Grupich, thank you.
I think your bylaws allow you to vote on whether or not individuals can extend their time, is that correct? I thought I picked up that on the paper that's outside. So I'm willing, I've got about 8 seconds left.
Would you all like to have a vote for extending people's time?
This is pretty important stuff. I mean, give us a break, huh?
Please, we just need to follow the organizational
Oh,
rules.
come on, give us a
That's what I'm
break.
trying to do. Feel free to take a vote. I'll wait.
For everyone to speak their piece.
All in favor of extending time?
Aye.
Opposed? Can you tell us how much more time you would like to have?
Does that come out of my time? The question of whether the city can pass its exemption to private co-applicants must be considered within the context of the prime project. While the current proposed ordinance does not apply to projects currently in
I'd like to
review,
yield my time to Mr. Burbidge.
I'm afraid the
You can have my 3
organizational
minutes.
rules don't allow for that. Please
Why not?
continue.
the prime development at Durkee is not currently exempt from zoning. But there's nothing to prevent Prime and the city from withdrawing their current application, reinitiating the process once this ordinance is in place. Eliminating the ability to pass the exemption to co-applicants does not prevent the project, and that is not my goal. But it does prevent the council from unilaterally pushing projects through when they deserve public input.
Thank you.
Thank you all for allowing me to.
Any other individual like to please come address the council?
Hello, my name is Sylvie Beaudreau. I'm going to tell a short story. Once upon a time, there was a mayor of a small town named Plattsburgh. His name was Colin Reed. He took a $10 million DRI grant and turned it into a nightmare for the citizens of his city.
I'm afraid you're out of order. We don't address individuals on the council. I wish I didn't have to draw that to your attention.
All right, then I won't. His fellow councilors enabled the mayor, voting regularly to approve everything he proposed. In consort with the city, a downtown developer proposed to build a giant residential commercial development on a parking lot which for decades served the people of the city well and helped revitalize its downtown area. The mayor and his councilors proposed moving the farmers market to a remote location by the sewage treatment plant. And try as he may, he and his fellow councilors never managed to convince the population that there would be one-to-one off-street parking replacement. The citizens organized angry protests. The mayor and his councilors dismissed these protests as being the anger of a few irate eccentrics who did not speak for the general population. The people, left with no option, formed the Plattsburgh Citizens Coalition, legally challenging what came to be called the Durkee Street disaster. They began to fundraise and raise awareness of what was going on. Local landlords and businesses signed petitions opposing the Prime LLC development. They put signs in their windows saying, "Vote no on Prime." The mayor and his councilors decided to take on the role of lead agency for the seeker process, a highly irregular move given that they are a political body. In the seeker process, the city boards were reduced to the status of involved agencies, but nonetheless they began to do their job of overseeing the approval process. The people showed up and expressed their anger and disbelief of what was happening. The zoning and planning board proved most responsive to the legitimate concerns of the citizens, also the county planning board. This made the mayor and councilors unhappy to see that their vanity project was being delayed. And the mayor and his councilors each week voted to spend taxpayer dollars on expensive consultants lawyers and engineering firms to make the Prime LLC development happen. They even hired a special attorney to fight the people's lawsuit challenging this Durkee Street disaster. And taxpayers had to subsidize these fees as well. At least $2 million taxpayer dollars were spent on preparing for Prime LLC. Lacking funds, the rest of the city, including our beautiful beach, fell into a sad state of dirtiness, weediness, and disrepair. Essential public services, including public safety, were cut. But then, in late June, the mayoral Democratic primary was held. It proved to be a referendum on the mayor's job performance, and especially on his handling of the DRI. The mayor was humiliatingly defeated by his own party. 60% of Democrats voted against the pro-Prime mayor. You could no longer say that opponents to Prime LLC were an angry minority. If the DRI and the Prime project had been popular, the mayor would have won the Democratic mayoral primary. He lost, and the council in the eyes of the public. But still, the councilors now remain, and far from realizing how unpopular their DRI plans were, they're digging in. Now they want to change local laws so that their future projects won't require local board approval. We say, no, the people of Plattsburgh will not give you the right to do this. You are not dictators. You were elected to represent us, not dictate to us. We know you won't listen to us. That is the familiar pattern. But if you go ahead and continue to behave in an arrogant, dictatorial, unresponsive way, you will suffer the same fate as the mayor in the polls. We will sweep you out of office. We wish to have our city planning and zoning boards continue to oversee all modifications to our city, including those initiated from the city itself. As the lesson we are bitterly learning from the Durkee Street disaster is that our local representatives can easily be swayed by political considerations and often act in a manner which is deleterious to the overall well-being of our and future of our community. So the answer is no to Bill P4. If you pass it in face of public opposition, we will consider an Article 78 challenge, and we will also be contacting the New York State Attorney General's Public Integrity Office. I speak on behalf of the Plattsburgh Citizens Coalition, and by the way, the judge did not dismiss our case against the city, he merely delayed it. Thank you for listening.
Any other individuals like to please come address the council?
There's a slight delay on the screen outside, so ask. Is there anyone else looking to speak?
Hello, my name is Joan Jansen. I have spoken in front of this body before. I'd like to say that I totally agree with everything that Ron Nolan stated. I think Sylvia Boudreau has got some good points. And I would just like to suggest to the councilors that they open their eyes. The rules and the regulations in place by the planning board and the zoning board are put there for a reason. They are requirements that make good sense. They protect the rest of us, the rest of the community. The procedures allow for objections to be aired, and often the revisions and the suggestions made during the process make for a better plan for both the applicant and for their neighbors. You insulted the role of the boards the first time when you suggested that a lawyer look into a board member's behavior. You have insulted them again by proposing P4. You, as if their services are, act as if their services are unnecessary. Think for a moment, what is the message that you are sending to potential future board members? Mayor Reed has this concept of one-stop shopping for developers. Well, you're already doing that. It's not a big deal. The boards need to work with the developers, and they do. They sit down together and they work things out. Think about this law and think about what you're saying. Part of what makes both boards work is that they are independent. Both boards have tried to keep politics out of the picture while they deal with this controversial prime project. It's been scientifically proven that groups make the best decisions when they are independent and they have diverse membership. If you try to rein in the boards, you subject them to the political whims of the people in power, or to put it bluntly, what we shall call corruption. My next comments I would like to make to the public and not to the board, because I think they're important for the public to hear. We're all familiar with the expression, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Well, our city council has decided that they are above complying with city codes. As long as the city is doing a project, all the rules and regulations in place to make Plattsburgh a good spot to live can be ignored. You and I have to get our plans approved by the building inspector's office, the planning board, and the zoning board. If the recent bill introduced by the Common Council is voted in by them, the legislation exempts the city's plans. No matter how good or how bad the plans are, they don't have to be reviewed and approved by the boards. Does that strike you as fair? Why do they get to ignore the rules that the rest of us must adhere to? These rules are designed to give consideration to parties other than the applicant. The city council is basically saying, these rules don't apply to us. We decline to take anyone else's needs into consideration. We'll do what we want. In essence, the Common Council is flipping all of us the bird. Let's return the favor. Let's vote out the incumbents and consider impeaching the remainder who do not represent their constituents.
Any other individuals like to please come address the council?
Hi, my name is Liu Xie. I live on 36 Prospect. I'm a citizen in the city, and I also work as urban planner, and I work for SUNY Plattsburgh. I also serve on the county planning board. I think many of the public have voiced a lot of really, really deep, alarming concerns over this law. I think I have worked as a planner for 16 years in different environments, Chinese, British, American way, political planning system, environment. I have to say, of all the situations I've worked with, no one single city would even dare to propose a law like this. So please, I think my question is, why was this proposed? Okay, what are the reasoning behind that? What are the evidences or what you see as a necessity to propose and pass a law like this?
Any other individual like to please come address the council?
Hi, Danielle Erb. I'd like to reiterate the same sentiment as to why I feel like the public deserves to know the motivation behind this proposal. And it was stated in the newspaper, Ira was quoted as saying something to the effect that as an example, the property on the base that was subdivided. But I don't recall there being any issue with that process. The process went through and everything was fine. So it does appear to the public that this is being done to either try to get around public input for the waterfront project currently going on, or to allow the Prime project to resubmit. Now I, did some basic research on the legality of this issue, and from what I can tell, New York state law, it does allow immunity, governmental immunity for zoning and planning regulations in cities, but the full immunity is basically only allowed for federal and state projects and land, where local municipalities are only subject to limited immunity. And so prior to 1988, the guidelines for that were that it had to be for uses, governmental uses, okay? And any proprietary uses for the land would be subject to local zoning and planning laws. After that, it was decided that it moved to basically an assessment structure where it would have to go through an assessment process to decide if the project was, if the public benefit was heavily weighted, if it provided a strong public benefit, then you could forego those rules. And a lot of municipalities do hold themselves to those rules just based on because it's the right thing to do. Okay, so I do have some. Can I submit some printouts here? And who would I hand them to?
Sure.
Okay, so this is just a basic review of those things that I had found myself, and I highlighted the important sections there. So that's my comment on this. I think that if the city goes through with this, the legality would be questionable for just passing a law that is a blanket statement allowing the municipality to forego any zoning or planning review based solely on the purpose that it is the municipality's project. I don't see anything out there, and it was stated in the paper that there are lots of other cities that have these laws in place, and I would like to see those examples, because I can't find any. So, and actually in that document, there is, in the footnotes section, I think it's 56, footnote 56 in the first document, there is examples of other municipality laws that do state what the exemptions are, and they specifically list, they're required to specifically list what those exemptions are, and that they would also have to adhere to that, to the requirements of that assessment process. So, thank you.
Any other individuals like to please come address the council? Thanks, Ethan.
Yeah, no problem. Hello, everyone. My name is John Seaton. We've all been here before, usually on a weekly basis. And I think instead of talking to you folks, because you've already made up your mind, I'm going to talk to the citizens of Plattsburgh. Hi, friends. Hi, neighbors. We love our city. We put in place protections. The zoning board and planning board have been there forever. They're your neighbors. You work with them. They're appointed by these people. The zoning board and planning board are put on by these people right here. They're like you and they're like me. We pay taxes and we want a quality of life. We want protections. But in their divine wisdom right now, they know better. Just remember that. They know better. It's malarkey. You're smart, Plattsburgh. You see what's happening. It's an end around. They don't like the fact that crime wasn't rubber stamped. We have thoughtful people protecting us, vetting the project to make it the best. And through time, it has gotten better. But if you allow this to happen, there'll be no conversations. There'll be rubber stamped in the back room and you won't even know it. It'll be done. Plattsburgh, wake up. It's time to vote. We made a very, very strong statement. We weren't happy with the mayor, and he suffered the consequences. There are people on this board right now, they're up for election. They're not hearing us. Vote. We're going to vote them out and take back our community. We're going to make it the best so there's no more end arounds. We're not going to get jerked around, and we're going to hire people and vote for people that listen to us and stop this end around and this garbage. Look at them. Zoning board members and planning board members go to school. They're educated. I was on it for 20 years. You want this guy right here, or that guy, to come up with a plan for you? It's ludicrous. Vote them out!
Any other individuals like to please come address the council? Ethan, want to do one more try out there? I'd like to adjourn this public hearing then and begin the council meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mayor Reed,
Present.
Councilor Barbell, Councilor Kelly,
Here.
Councilor Gibbs,
Here.
Councilor Brody,
Here.
Councilor McFarland,
Here.
Councilor Moore,
Here.
Please continue.
Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of the Common Council held on October 8, 2020 are approved and placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office.
Moved by Councilor Kelly, second by Councilor Brody. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Resolved that the payrolls of the various departments of the city of Plattsburgh for the week ending October 14, 2020 in the amount of $57,158.48 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby empowered and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councilor Moore, second by Councilor Kelly. Discussion?
Yeah, something's happening.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Are there any other additional reports from committees? Seeing none, resolved reports are hereby ordered received, and any written reports are placed on file among public records of the city clerk's office. Moved by Councilor Gibbs and second by Councilor Brody. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. No correspondences, recommendations from boards at this time. Please continue.
Resolved that the bills voted by the Common Council for the week ending October 16, 2020 in the amount of $1,065,162.19 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby authorized and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councilor Gibbs and second by Councilor Moore. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. This is now another opportunity for the public to please come and address the council on any issues on the item or items on the agenda tonight. Seeing none, please continue.
Resolved that the Common Council hereby directs city attorney to make a GML 239-M referral to the Clinton County Planning Board for local law P-4 of 2020, a local law amending Chapter 300 subdivision of land and Chapter 360 zoning of the city code of the city of Plattsburgh to provide exemptions for city projects.
Moved by Councilor Kelly, second by Councilor McFarland. Discussion.
Yeah, obviously we just heard a bunch of people come and talk at the public hearing. I thought it was a little funny because I'm pretty certain we have our minds made up, even though I didn't even know this law until it was proposed. No one's heard what I think about it. But I guess shouldn't let that be in front of the story. So they certainly think we've made up our minds, but I'm curious to think what other people think.
So this item is merely to send this for consideration of the Clinton County Planning Board, is not to approve the local law, correct?
Correct.
And so Dean, what does this local law do if it's passed? Obviously, this is the Senate and County Planning Board, but let's say the local law is passed, what does it do?
So currently, there's a 9-point test because the city does not have an exemption statutorily, and the city has applied the 9-point test in the past to determine whether or not to exempt specific city projects. That's come up with smaller kind of sidewalk repairs all the way up to the Wilcox small boat marina. So there is a process already in place for the city to exempt itself from the city projects. However, by codifying this through this proposed local law, that 9-point test would not be required. It would allow the city to perform certain actions for city projects. This would not allow for a city development of a private project, but if it was a public works building, for example, that would not require site plan review, or if it was a simple subdivision of city-owned property, that would not require formal subdivision approval by those respective boards. However, this does not exempt itself. You cannot exempt the city from state or federal regulations. So any building code would still require code compliance. Any SHPO requirements would still be required, as well as any seeker requirements would still be required. So it says what it says as far as what it exempts. It exempts city subdivisions and then city code requirements for city projects.
Now, Mr. Gervich brought up, he says that the law doesn't specify whether it would apply to public-private partnerships. Would it apply to those? What's the answer to that?
It would not. The city is not in the business of developing residential private apartments, for example. That's just not what a city does. So there's no practical example that I can think of where a city would be developing a proprietary structure. Whereas a public structure, again, such as a pavilion or a public space or a public works department structure, those would be exempt because those are city projects, but they're not private projects.
So this wouldn't apply to public-private partnerships?
No.
So there was concerns brought up if the prime applications were withdrawn from the zoning board and the planning board and they were reissued. Would this local law, if it were passed, exempt that?
I can't speak in the I can't speculate in the abstract. Right now, there's pending projects in front of those boards, and they're subject to a vote within the next month or two, and that's what we have in front of us right now. If they are withdrawn, and then the city is the owner of the property, then that's the future. I cannot predict that. I have no idea what that future will hold.
And Ms. Erd brought up, she asked the question if these were, such laws were enacted in other cities. Are we aware of any other such cities that have such laws?
Yes, and this local law was modeled off the template from another jurisdiction.
Do you know what the jurisdiction was?
I don't want to get into it because it was based on a discussion with another attorney.
Any additional questions about sending this to the county planning board for their consideration?
The only other question that was brought up that I'm curious about is, it was asked, what was the purpose of this law? Why is it being brought forth now? Is this something that's been talked about for a while, or what's the answer to that question?
At least in my tenure, it's been on my to-do list for over 2 years, just haven't gotten around to it. And it's really with these, it's been recommended and been sought after, just haven't put it together for recently.
Any further questions? Roll call.
Counselor Barbell? Oh, sorry. Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
No.
Counselor Brody?
No.
Counselor McFarland?
No.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
We poll Councilor Barbell and see what his preference was.
You can hear.
I think Councilor Moore's got his speaker
Well,
off.
I did.
He's raising his hand, so I think he's in favor.
He raised his hand.
He needs to orally state it.
We can't see it there.
I know what ours is.
He's right behind you on a computer.
Does it say yes or no?
Well, he's giving a thumbs up. I don't know if that's legally acceptable, Dean. He needs to actually say, is he dialed in on a phone somewhere?
He was, yeah.
Can you call him?
He is.
Why don't you put him on in front of the microphone and,
Again, there was interference coming through. It
Oh.
was on, oh, I just said I'll put you on speaker.
Can you put it by the microphone?
There's a microphone right here. Yes, you are.
Councilor Barbell?
Have you heard all of the discussions, Councilor Barbell?
Yeah, he can hear fine, just can't speak.
Can you confirm that?
Have you heard the discussion, Councilor Barbell?
Yeah, yes, I can hear everything.
Do you want to roll call him again then?
Councilor Barbell?
Yes.
That's a yes. There's 3 yeses and 3 noes.
And then I'll vote to send this to Clinton County Planning Board for consideration.
Mayor broke the tie in the affirmative. It's adopted. Bless you.
Just mute. You don't need to turn your volume to this mute.
Approving award of construction contract for
Beth,
Plattsburgh.
I'd like to make a motion to waive the reading and move this to resolution, please.
Moved by Councilor Gibbs, second by Councilor Kelly. Discussion.
Yeah, Matt, can you tell us a bit about this?
You.
So the question of what to do about the future of the farmers market with the planned development of the Durkee parking lot has been a problem that my office has been working on for the better part of 2 years. Over the course, we've had a number of different proposals, including a building to be put in one of the islands down by the Harborside parking lots. Initial discussions with our consulting engineer, we felt that would be too expensive. We focused our attention instead on one of the MLD buildings, which at that time was scheduled to be demolished through a grant that the city had received through ESD. In consultation with the mayor and the council, we asked the state to amend the terms of that grant to allow us to keep one of those buildings in place to serve as the future home of the farmers market. We also worked with Homes and Community Renewal, a state agency that is administering the city's downtown grant program, to see if we could amend the guidelines of the downtown grant program, the DGP, to allow the city to be an applicant and to utilize some of those funds to pay for refurbishment and rehabilitation of the building that remains down on the former PMLD site. After quite a bit of back and forth, we received their approval. In the spring, the city released a bid specification for improvements to that site. The schedule at that time was somewhat accelerated because at that time we had anticipated construction of the prime project to begin at some point this summer. Of course, that didn't take place. We received one bid in response. The council voted several months ago to reject that bid on the recommendation of our consulting engineer. About a month and a half ago, the city released a rebid of the same specification with a different bid structure, which included a base bid with the minimum number of improvements we felt would be necessary for the market to operate effectively out of that building and the surrounding site, and a number of alternate bids that were things that the market had requested, but we weren't sure we could afford with the budget that we had in mind. And that budget was about $277,000. It's the $250,000 DGP award that the council awarded sometime last year, plus the city's 10% match, which is a little over $27,000. We received bids last week. The results of the bid round were much more favorable than the first one. We received 5 bids instead of 1. The low bid was submitted by Murnane Building Contractors, who I'm sure most of you know are based right here in Plattsburgh. Based on discussions with the Plattsburgh Farmers Market leadership and our consulting engineer and the budget that we had to work with, my office made a recommendation to the council that the base bid and 2 alternate bids be awarded to Murnane based on their low bid. And those base bid improvements, again, will give the market a building that they can operate out of. The additional improvements include an overhead door and several overhead ceiling fans in the interior of the building, plus some additional water and sewer work that will provide fresh water and sewage to the building. The city does plan to park our bathroom trailer that until several years ago was out at the beach down there, so the market has a nice place to use for their bathrooms and reduces the cost on the city of building permanent bathrooms. So that's where it stands now. The choice is before the council. Of course, the council can choose to award the base bid and any number of options or nothing at all. But with the recommendation by the CDO now, the total construction cost with the base bid, alternate 3 and 4 is $276,600. That would leave the city with a 10% match in the amount of $27,660 and a total of $248,940 of the $250,000 grant award being utilized. So we're leaving very little money on the table from that grant award that is not being used. Due to a miscommunication on my part, Julie Bond, the markets manager, was not able to be here tonight, but she did say that if the council has any questions for her, I can call her on her cell and she can speak to the speaker. But if the council has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Well, Julie's come and spoken numerous times to the council and expressed, I believe her number was about 2/3 or maybe 3/4 of the farmers market vendors want to move down there even if crime doesn't happen, correct?
I believe the figure was 2/3 of the vendors, yes.
And she's seen, and her and other members of the farmers market have seen this proposal from Renee?
Yes.
And they still are in favor of moving down there?
Yes.
And they, did she have anything else, or did anyone else from the farmers market have anything else they wish to express to the council before we voted on it?
There was some regret that the pavilion wasn't able to be afforded, but as I noted in the memo to the council, the inclusion of that alternate alone would up the city's out-of-pocket expenses from about $27,000 to $87,000. Now, of course, it's possible that we could construct that pavilion at some point in the future, but at this point, for this round of improvements, from a financial perspective, I think it makes more sense to simply award the base bid and the 2 alternates and plan for perhaps a larger expansion at some point in the future.
And how much of the grant money are we going to do? You said it's a minimum amount?
Less than $1,500 out of $250,000.
So the total cost of the city is going to be $27,000.
$27,760.
Are the farmers paying any rent?
They do pay an annual fee to the city for the use of the current market building.
How much is that?
It's a nominal fee. It's several $100s, I believe.
I think it's $375.
$375.
Or is the city building a building for $250,000 or $75 a month?
No, $375.
It's for the season.
And is this going to be capable of being used all year round, 4 seasons?
So there is not insulation included in the improvements, so uses in the winter months would be limited. But of course, there are always future improvements that we can make if the city can find a useful way to utilize that building in the winter months.
Now, Addendum 4, tell me a little bit about that, because that was for adding plumbing or something in the...
Yeah, so Project Alternate 4, it was the inclusion of it's called a Sewage Duplex grinder pump. The way that the farmers market sits, in order to get sewage to the city's existing infrastructure, it's actually going uphill, so you need a pump to actually pump it there. So a pump will be installed behind the building with plumbing coming from the building, which will empty into it. The bathroom trailer can be hooked up directly to that grinder pump to get the sewage and wastewater directly to the city's sewer system. It also includes a new mop sink and associated plumbing, so they have fresh water in the building for, food preparation, whatever they might need it for, and a hot water cooler as well. again, for whatever use they might need it.
So they'd have water, but they just wouldn't have bathrooms?
They would have bathrooms, but they would be on the exterior of the building in the city's bathroom trailer. And for handicapped access, we would likely have to get a single handicapped porta potty for the area because the bathroom trailer is not handicapped accessible.
Now, that bathroom trailer you said was being brought from the beach over?
It's currently sitting in a garage at DPW, but in previous years it had been used at the beach as a public restroom.
So what's going to be used at the beach next year if that's going to be a performance?
We're planning to have the public restrooms repaired and ready for use by the public next year, assuming COVID restrictions allow for that.
That was the southern bathhouse, but that can't possibly include the northern bathhouse.
There's no immediate plans for refurbishment of the northern bathhouse now.
Speaking of next year, what's your position?
Position on?
Working. What's your title? Where are you going to be?
I hope to be here with the city as Director of Community Development to see the DRI through and all the other projects that we're working on.
Did you say the department was eliminated?
According to what I see in the budget, there's one person on the salary line, and it looks like everybody else has moved out of that salary line. That's what I see.
This has nothing to do with the resolution we're
That is true.
considering.
It does not.
Could we move on, please?
Any other questions from the council?
No, thank you, Matt.
Yep.
Matt, I just have one. Did we create a capital project for this, or do I have to do this?
We did. We might have to amend it based on the bid results, but...
I'll get with you then. Thanks.
Yep, no problem.
Any further discussion?
I mean, to give Councilor Brody and anyone else, I remember when the park development was first put forth, the farmer's market asked if they could move. They didn't want to stay there.
Yep.
They were given the option of staying there, moving to the Arnie Pavone lot. However, if they moved to the Arnie Pavone lot, they were not going to be permitted, we were not going to build a building there. Or they could move to Trinity Park, where they also wouldn't have a building, but they could do tents or at either. Or they could, we could envision moving them down there and building, and if we could get the grant funding, building a lot. I think it was unanimously, no, I think one person said something else, if I remember correctly, but they all wanted to move down. So we've pretty much gone with the farmer's market on what they've asked every time, so I don't see anything.
I think it's good. I think it's good. I just think that the amount of income that the $27,000 is costing the city should be recouped in a proportionate way.
Well,
I mean, every member of the market pays dues every single time. I ran the farmer's market for 1.5 years. Yeah, and school was there. And back then, everybody was kicking in $25 per session. You got 20 vendors, that's not that much. And they usually use it for advertising and such, but part of that should be, a fair proportion of it should be to the city for the cost. That's all.
Any further discussion?
They double would be nice.
Roll call?
You have your phone on, Jeff?
Yeah, I guess I'm just saying, take a look at it.
Counselor Barbell?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Brody?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the Common Council approves that Planner Melina Tamer be named the City of Plattsburgh's responsible local official and primary login holder for the purposes of access and use of the Internet Government Solutions, IGS, Equitable Business Opportunities, EBO system.
Moved by Councilor Kelly, second by Councilor Gibbs. Discussion?
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I hadn't heard of this, so I'm curious as to what this is.
So when federal grant funding is involved in transportation projects, in particular this is in reference to the Saranac River Trail, there is an online system for confirming and reviewing what are called DBE requirements. That's Disadvantaged Business Enterprise requirements. It's required for all federal projects. When we reached out to their administrative team to restore the city's access, They told us that the city's current primary user is listed as Adam Frazier, who has not worked for the city for a number of years, and told us that in order to restore access, we would have to submit a single-page form, but it would also require a municipal resolution officially naming a new designated official. So the resolution here does that. We vetted the language with their admin team. So this is simply to get us access back to that system so we can move forward with the contracting process for the Saranac River Trail.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Roll call?
Counselor Barbell?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Brody?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
No travel requests this time. Are there any resolutions for initial consideration? Any new business or additional council reports?
Yes, I'd like to make a statement. Been a number of decisions regarding this budget that are going to be left for a future council and a mayor to decide and work out, and leaving the 2021 budget rather uncertain. Meetings for the last 2 weeks should be a strong indication of the effects of these decisions, creating uncertainty, general anxiety, and concern. I'm hoping that the department heads during your budget hearings will be prepared to discuss how these changes are going to affect your day-to-day operations of your department, how the city will be impacted by the changes, and any obstacles you're going to face. I want to make it clear, I'm not saying that we shouldn't make any reductions in the overall budget, but what I am saying is we should work in a manner that includes more collaboration and works to reduce the budget in smaller increments rather than large sweeping changes. That's all I have to say.
Any other councilor comments?
Well, I have one comment. I notice our meetings have been getting progressively larger, and I really have some concerns about, we have people in here shouting and whatnot. I mean, I don't want to put something up for initial consideration at this time, but I'd like to really reevaluate, or at least have a decent discussion about maybe going back to Zoom meetings or whatever, because we're experiencing a slight uptick in COVID, and I would hate to see that we created some kind of super spreader event. I don't know how everybody else feels about that, but I think we should seriously consider maybe looking at that if we're going to continue to have larger meetings in a room that has no ventilation. Does anyone else have any comments?
Yeah, Beth and I worked pretty much for the last 24 hours trying to prepare this building and keep it safe for you all, and obviously it's the guidelines they're trying to put in place aren't being adhered to by the public very well at all. I apologize for that. My important goal is to maintain access to the Common Council as best we possibly can, and I know I was ridiculed last week for this, but I believe that we probably allowed for better access to the council than just about any other jurisdiction anywhere in the state of New York for the last, since the COVID era began. We've been leaders in this, and I certainly have to unfortunately agree with you that we're not receiving all that much cooperation on it. I'd hate to see us go back to Zoom. We tried to put things in place. I don't think they're working particularly well. On the other hand, we're going to be criticized greatly by trying to protect you, of which more than half this council are in the high-risk group, over 60 years of age. So it is rather troubling. With regard to the community, I think your statement that we're regressing a little bit is probably an understatement. We've now, just in the last few days, had 8 more incidences on the campus, for instance. We've been having each day 2, 3, 4 new instances of COVID. We haven't had that rate of increase, that daily rate since the very worst of COVID in this area before we put it on the mask policy. So clearly our community is developing a certain resistance to measures to try to really protect ourselves, and as much as I would like to really try to keep us as open as possible, it's getting increasingly difficult, and the level of resistance and recalcitrance is getting worse and worse all the time as well. So, I guess I'm just about at wit's end. for expecting we can figure out a way to do all this through civil dialogue. And I'm certainly open to any of the will you all have. I'm always going to try to ensure, as we've always done, and as we were recognized for being the most open government in the state, I'll try to keeping this as open as we possibly can. But please don't underestimate how hard Beth and I work on trying to do this, again, with not much cooperation.
That's all I have.
I have a couple of questions. About June, maybe Richard can clarify this. I'm busy thinking over. June, we were looking at a net loss projected on our budget of, what, $3 million originally?
For 2020?
For 2020, we were projecting the last budget was at the beginning of loss of $800,000. Was it 1 million?
There was a
On the first budget.
There was a resolution for 2020 that was projecting a $3.5 million loss that was introduced in April.
Okay. And now at this budget here, we're where?
Currently, the projection I have is putting the city at general fund. Projections. Hold on. I've been following the numbers week by week, and projected right now for a $289,000 loss for 2020. But that's without the adjustment for the actual retirement bill.
Okay.
It's supposed to come in at $340,000 less based on the estimate that we received in August. Provided that comes in that way, that'll add $317,000 from general fund, so we'll be at a surplus, roughly $30,000.
Right.
Now, the sales tax in that projection is still at 31% loss for the year, meaning we would lose $1,300,000 out of $4,275,000. As of the latest reports on the sales tax for September, the city's performance against last year is only about 5% behind, and against budget we're only about 2% behind.
20%, 26% increase in income?
Pardon me?
20%, 26% higher than we projected then?
Yeah, against last year's results, but we actually have budgeted a 31% projected loss this year during that budget resolution that was put in back in April.
So, but we only lost like 5%.
So far. Now, the last quarter of sales tax in the city is about 32% of the total annual collections. But in order for us to equal that 31% loss, that would mean we're only going to collect $65,000 in our last quarter for the whole year. So, keeping in mind anything can happen, winter's coming, no Canadian traffic, holiday shopping might be down, whatever. Even if we lose half of that 31%, we're going to have another $600,000 in sales tax coming in, which will put us in a surplus of roughly $600,000 for the year.
Well, 600, we're going to come out tentatively good at $600,000.
Just about what we had originally budgeted for. And this is new. This discussion is the same as what we told movies that we went over several times. The year's turning out to be very, very good, as a matter of fact, and it's contrary to all the expectations that were back in April, especially made by the county with saying we're going to lose 31% of the taxes for sales taxes. That was their projection, and we adopted that.
The county thought they were going to lose $15 million, if I remember correctly, and that's what this report had.
Yeah, and I think based on that number, that was 31% of their expected collections. Now, it's just not happening. So, things are looking good. It's looking like we're going to have that surplus of roughly $680,000 that just like we, or $668,000, whatever it was, we actually budgeted for 2020.
So my thought is like the mayor's got the budget and we're going to have a 15% property tax rebate, roughly.
Reduction, that's right, yeah.
And we're at a $600,000 plus surplus. I kind of agree with Elizabeth here. My worry is that COVID might be happening again. I'm worried about essential services. And I feel that my position is supposed to be the voice of the people. And everybody wants to keep the police, and everybody wants to keep the fire department well-staffed for the public safety. Instead of giving back 15%, let's look at what the cost for the municipality, the fire department, police, and even Richard's department is, and let's just back it out of that 15% surplus that we're giving back, and let's just keep 8% or 5% and keep the status quo for the police and the fire and everything.
Well, we're already keeping the status quo for the police and the fire.
Well, that's assuming that people want to retire.
Well, we've already got indications that they are.
Well, my brother's one of those indications. And he's always been thinking about retiring, but he's 72 and still working. But I'm saying,
yeah, I guess we could have just hired.
You're a brick and mortar man, you base your tax upon hard facts. You've done everything I've seen on your numbers is strictly by the book. But right now, you're projecting that people may want to retire. But if they don't, it's fiscal disaster. And what you're giving to the new administration could be a catastrophic disaster. So what I'm just saying is, let's look at what the fire and police are budgeted for right now. Let's take that out of the tax increase and then say, there's what it should be. Instead of giving back 15%, give back 8%, give back 10%. And let's include the community development office while we're at it, because that's the department, I think, is one of the most important departments for the city, is you gotta have, I think it's understaffed. I think it needs to go out to the small businessman and get there. But if we got this 15% increase, let's put it to use. Let's put it to use for the taxpayer, for health and safety. Let's put it to use for the city, for growth and development, and still give something back.
See, the city of Plattsburgh has been a fiscal nightmare for the taxpayers for decades and decades and decades.
Yeah.
It cost our city 15% more to operate every year than cities around us in the North Country. Now you have to ask yourself the question, well, how is it that Watertown, for example, can run their city for $8.22 per thousand? Are they any less safe than us? Is their water any less good? Are their sewer services any? So
they cut a bunch of jobs.
It is fair.
I contacted the city manager and asked him.
It is fair to ask the question, why can't we do that? Why can't we deliver the services at a price that's reasonable and affordable to our taxpayers? We are consistently higher every year in our tax rate than our sister cities here in the North Country. Why is that, Steve? Do you know?
Well, I think if I listen to you, it's because the payroll for the fire department and police are higher.
What do you think? I mean, you don't have to listen to me. What do you think?
I think that we're here to do the will of the people. And I haven't heard anybody. We had 10 people, 11 people come in today. 10. And not one single person said, thank you for lowering my property taxes. Matter of fact, the one that talked about property taxes said, here, take my money. I want safety. I want fire. I want protection.
That was last Thursday, yeah.
And it's not just a matter of making things easier for people. And let me tell you something. There are people in my ward who are struggling to put food on the table and stay in their homes. Okay?
You mean nothing, but I'm right there as well.
There are two Plattsburghs. Okay? There's the Plattsburgh that is well-to-do, has good income, good retirement, good benefits, and then there's the other Plattsburgh that's the average income in our city is $34,000 a year. There are 20% of our population is on public assistance. 1 in 5 persons you see on the street are on public assistance. So this is the reality of what we're dealing with. And having a burdensome tax rate does not help anybody, rich or poor.
I agree. That's why we need a special service fee. We need to get away from the property tax. We need to move towards something that all people pay for their fair share. Everybody, not just the taxpayers. You've got so many major municipalities or government entities that are not paying their fair share. The county, the hospitals, the schools, the housing authorities, you name it. They don't pay, but
So
they benefit from everything. So
that
they
is
should
something
pay.
that can be done in perhaps 5 years. Let's make that a 5-year plan, because frankly, that's how long it would take, if it would ever happen at all. It's up to the state legislature to tell us if we can have a special
Patrick, where are we going
curb
on that,
fees
by
or
the way?
not.
They said they were going and checking in with Ways and Means.
So-
I talked to Billy Jones's office just 2 nights ago.
So the question to you, and all of you, the larger question here is not, well, how do we fund police? How do we fund fire? The larger question is, do we want to maintain the status quo in which we have a structural deficit that we cannot address, that requires us to year after year after year try to struggle to find ways to fund the city, or do we want to get past that and move
We're not in
on?
a structural
Let me
deficit.
finish, please.
We're
Let me
$600,000
finish, please.
plus.
Let me finish, please. Or do we want to maintain the status quo, or do we want to move on to something better, where we eliminate our structural deficit, where we find ways to run our government more efficiently so that we can do things like return 15% to our taxpayers, so that we can have a lower tax rate and attract development. Finally, I'll say that it's your choice. It's your choice. Maintain the status quo, in which we're barely squeaking by, or run a highly efficient city that delivers good quality, good value, good services to our consumers, our taxpayers. That's your choice. That's what you're voting for. You know, take your pick. Take your pick. You know,
We are
you can keep picking away. You can keep picking away at, small things, or you can address the larger issue. And I suggest this is a year we address the larger issue. How do we run a city more efficiently? How come Glens Falls has a $9.97 tax rate and we're $11.65? Is Glens Falls any less pleasant a place to live in?
No, but they're tax exempt property base. I mean, we were here the other day with
The average tax exempt property in New York State.
And the more they take, the less income is being generated.
The average exempt property rate in New York State is about the same as ours, about 33, 34%. That argument doesn't wash. That every city has that challenge. Plattsburgh is not unique in that regard. We have to deal with that.
I've never been to Watertown. The one thing I do know about Watertown is we could lower our tax rate to 0, and we would still be paying higher taxes than people in Watertown.
I'm not sure what you're saying, but
Because in Watertown, you said what's their tax rate?
$8.22 per thousand.
Sure, and their school district pays 9.5 per thousand. So combine those together, you're what, looking at 17%?
Do you know what we pay per thousand? If you
We pay
combine them all?
11.5.
$40.57.
And our school is 22.5.
23.
So that's what I'm just saying, we can't compete with Watertown on taxes.
We can't control the school district, but we can control our city.
That's true.
Well,
That's where
there's
we need
one
to
thing
focus our
that
efforts.
no one here in this room can control, which is an enormous contributor to the tax rate. I've had this conversation with Brian Kramer on a number of occasions. I know this because I'm a school teacher, and this was a huge barrier for us a couple years ago, and it is present here in Clinton County. Clinton County pays some of the highest health insurance costs of any of these northern regions. And there are a number of reasons contributing to that, but that is the reality. Health insurance costs a lot up here in Clinton County, and that is an enormous burden to everybody.
The city of Plattsburgh has had reductions in health insurance costs for 2 years now.
It's stayed about the same. The trend is low, but the rates are higher in Clinton County because it was evident back in 2007 and 8 when Albany said they didn't want to be rated as part of the North Country anymore because the North Country country was increasing their premium rates, and they wanted to be removed from it. And that's when we had to go to a self-funded plan in 2006 for our major health care plans. And then in about 2009 or 10, we had to move our HMOs out as well, because
Remember
the premium base was going up 30 to 40% for all of our health care plans, so we had to go to self-funded. And that was because Albany said, we want out of that rating district because their costs are higher up there than they are down here, and we don't want to be rated with them. So yes, the health care costs in the North Country are some of the highest that you're going to see.
And yet, the city of Plattsburgh has dealt with that. We've dealt with that in a number of ways, and we've been fairly successful with it in recent years.
Well, the self-funding has helped dramatically. The stop-loss insurance that we buy is also part of that. It limits our exposure. It keeps, the costs reasonable.
Finding a new-
Our trends are lower than normal,
Yes.
than average in the marketplace for a lot of things. However, pharmacy costs, of course, are high.
Finding a new firm to help us with the healthcare cost has been a good thing as it turned
Vernon
out.
Benefits Manager have done a very good job, but also going through a PRO Act for our pharmacy and introducing programs there to maximize on the subsidy for Medicare prescription rebates has helped dramatically, and also driving the costs down for our pharmacy benefits manager by continuing to look at what the marketplace requires and having competition. So yeah, there's a lot of things that we've been doing to do that.
So we're very pragmatic in dealing with the retirees rather than have picking that fight with them, which as you know, I believe we were on the wrong side of morality on that. But the fact is, we put together a decent budget. You all asked me to put together a budget. You all said, is there anything you can do about not having to lay people off, go through attrition? You've had a hiring freeze in place. You said, is there anything you can do to encourage people to, with early retirement, etc.? I've done all those things. And when I finally did all, then you came and said, can you still trim down a further 10%? I've done them all. We're not laying off people. As a matter of fact, the workforce is actually expanding. We're bringing 3 people in to work with DPW. We're bringing 2 more people in to work at least with MLD. We're not laying off any uniformed officers. There's the same number. So yeah, we could go to, and then at the end, it translates to a 15% tax reduction. So yeah, we could only go for a 5% tax reduction and pad those payroll and instead go to a 40 or 44 person fire department and hire another 10 extra cops after we replace the cops that are retiring by putting even more in the academy. Yeah, we can do all those things instead of the tax cut if you want. I guess there's 2 ways to look at things. We could try to right size and get as much efficiency in city government as we possibly can. That's what I've certainly spent 4 years trying to do with some success. And then we can look at that and say, well, we've reached a new point where we're now no longer looking at $172 million OPEB liability. We're down to $151 million OPEB liability. Good work. And then we can pat ourselves on the back to that and say, perfect. Now that we've done that, we make 2 choices. One, we continue on that path, which Moody's is suggesting we do. Otherwise, we threaten our bond rating. They stated that very clearly. Or the other is we say, we've done such a good job that now we've got an opportunity to spend, and go right back into the same pattern we used to be in. So I guess we're at a choice of deciding whether to right size or taking these temporary financial successes and using them as an opportunity to regress. I mean, it's ultimately going to be your choice. But I did the budget you asked me to do, and I did the retirement analysis that you asked me to do, and I provided the incentives, and I'm working with a union to figure out novel ways to do exactly what you asked me to do. But now you don't seem too happy with what you asked me to do because maybe I did it too well. I don't know. But the fact is, this isn't smoke and mirrors. This is a really good budget. This holds us accountable, but we've been doing that for the last 3 years. We're producing very good results from it. So yeah, we're at a fork in the road. We now need to decide whether we're going to go back to the old ways in Plattsburgh based on our successes, or come to a renewed Plattsburgh based on our successes and what Moody's and the Financial Restructuring Board and the Comptroller and everybody recognizes a start that we really ought to continue.
I have a question. You mentioned OPEB, which I'm looking at your budget narrative here, which is it's other post-employment benefits. I'm curious about, I've never heard OPEB before last week. And I see here, and I think you just mentioned it went down from 172 million at the end of 2017, while the sum has been brought down to 151 million. What is OPEB?
It's most of the people that we're paying retire or healthcare benefits out of are not current employees, they're past employees.
What about
They're all the
past
promises
employees?
that we made to past employees for their services for years and years ago, which we decided not to pay at that time for those costs. Instead, we said, here's a clever idea. How about if we get the next generation to pay for the costs for those past services? And it's called OPEB.
So it's paying for retirees' benefits.
Healthcare, primarily, yeah.
And perhaps their families and a level one.
Yep, that's right.
So how did that lower from 172 to 151? How do we control that?
Well, if you have a better cost containment on healthcare, so it's not rising at the same rate, Chamberlain Marks is absolutely correct, and we've not had large healthcare increases over the last few years because we've managed it very aggressively. But everywhere else has been averaging, what, 5%, 6%, 7% increases, and we've avoided those. So, but 3 years of avoiding 5%, 6%, 7% increases by managing it aggressively saves you 20%. What's 20% reduction of $171 million? It's about where we're at. And we also have saved because as your workforce gets smaller, they calculate the size of your workforce and what's that going to mean in 10 and 20 and 30 years for our OPEB calculations. How much is it going to cost us to service this payroll in 10 or 20 or 30 years in the future, because we're not paying for it now, we're shoving that bill to a future generation for the services we provide today. So they look at all that, they do a present value calculation of the total liability to the city. That's an unfunded mandate, unfunded liability, based on the size of your workforce, the age and demographics of your workforce, and the expected health care costs to maintain your workforce in retirement. And that's how they come up with a number. So we've tried to very aggressively manage that, because we are going in exactly the wrong direction. If we continued with the path we were on, I would have expected that number to have been closer to 190 million instead of 150 million by now.
Richard, do you have anything to add to the conversation about this OPEB reduction? Anything that you can shed light on for us?
Basically, the census that we provided in 2018 and 2019 are pretty much the same. The 18 report was a full analysis, and the 19 report is an interim analysis. So everything that we reported, and I report the census information to them, pretty much the same from 18 to 19. Premium rates equivalent to the same, budget the same. No changes in the healthcare plans at all. The actuary that did the report, reported to me that the major reason for the decrease is because of interest rate trending down. For the analysis of the 85-year forward look at what the costs are going to be discounted to present value. Healthcare cost trends were also down for the 85-year forward look, discounted to present value. But the biggest reason for the reduction is that the Cadillac tax was eliminated in December of 2019. So, our plans didn't change much at all. It's like we didn't do anything from 18 to 19 to actually cause that decrease. It's all based on the actuary's calculation, and the biggest reduction was the Cadillac tax elimination.
A really good way to remember what our OPEB costs are is, in today's dollars, it's $600,000 per employee. So whenever we hire an employee, at whatever we hire them at today, we also have to pay $600,000 in today's dollars for their future health care. So please keep that in mind as you think about the size of our workforce. If we add people, we've just tacked on another $600,000 to future taxpayers. And that's in today's dollars. I'd have to defer to an economist to tell me what that might be in $20, $40. gonna be even more. So a good figure for you to remember is $600,000.
And would you, we're all parents, would you do that to your kids? Would you say, geez, I don't really want to pay my health care costs this year? Instead, what I'd like to do is have my daughter pay my health care costs this year, 20 years from now. That's basically what we're doing. We're enjoying the services right now. We're not paying the cost of them. We're kind of free riding on a future generation, saying, tough luck, guys. You weren't around to vote for this budget this year. We voted for it. We didn't want to recognize the true cost of it, and we're going to leave that liability for you to pay someday. If we're a private corporation, that would be actually illegal. Because we're a city, we're allowed to do it, but a lot of municipalities are hearing proposals from their state governments to require them to start putting the money aside. We'd have to be putting $3 or $4 million aside if we were to do the responsible thing, which we haven't been. So I think OPEB is a serious thing that the public needs to understand. I think when they hear numbers that large, $172 million, their eyes just gloss over and they don't even know how to comprehend it. It's a huge sum because we've decided to not pay the full cost of our health care, and we've sent that bill on to some future generation who are not here at all to enjoy one iota of the services provided by the workers who are garnering that right.
We don't pay our health care?
We don't pay the health care that we're promising them for the future. We're asking a future generation to pay for the health care of the employees today when they retire. Is your daughter really keen on paying for your health care in retirement?
She lives in California.
Well, would she be?
Is it possible, Richard, that if we were to look at things based upon the percentage of property taxes, what the other expenses that we're looking at would cost, like if we maintain the fire and the police?
We would maintain the fire and the police.
2%. I mean, everybody that was here was talking about firing people.
We're not firing anybody. We're maintaining the fire and police. For every person retiring, we're promising to put somebody in the academy. This is the first time we've ever done that in a budget. Normally, somebody retires, we go, oh, well, geez, I hope maybe next year or the year after there might be somebody going to the academy. We're budgeting that this year.
Because there was one retired officer here, I think it's Rich Hilson, right?
Yes.
Was saying that I retired 2 years ago, and Craig, right? And that nobody replaced me, which seems like a natural way of cutting the budget down.
Yes, we did use that strategy.
Yeah.
Until this budget. Now we're replacing people as they retire. And it's not going over very well, as you can see.
Well, that's the part that scares me, though, is you're projecting that these people are going to retire.
We do that every year.
Really?
We just in previous years didn't budget for the replacements. We always do succession planning every year. Now we're just trying to do it much more scientifically. We're really asking probing questions. We're asking our department heads to go and talk to the people and see, are they truly interested in retiring this year? And you asked me to come up with various incentives.
Yeah.
So we're trying to look for, is there something that would help you make that decision? Ultimately, it's your decision. You're volunteering to retire or not. But we recognize that if you're willing to make that decision, we can put a young cadet in and save some money. It might be good for you because you've got a choice you wouldn't have had to make otherwise, wouldn't have had available to you otherwise. It's good for the cadet, they're getting a job. It's good for the city, we're keeping the same number of public safety officers.
We're maintaining the status quo of the departments. The fire department, police department are all going to be the same head count. It's just that the seniors are going to be semi-retiring and the new recruits are going to come in, and that there won't be any
That's what I keep saying.
Forcing out.
That's right. Of course not.
So
We can't force them out.
came in today, or last week.
Let's say we decided that we are going to force somebody out. We said, geez, you've been here for 25 years. You're going. So we're going to get rid of that position. You know what? That person is not going to leave. Because of union seniority, the very lowest paid cadet is going to, or the lowest paid person who we hired and trained last year came out of the academy, they're going to be the ones losing their job. We can't, we're not laying anybody off like that. If somebody doesn't want to go, they're volunteering to go. They're only going to go if the incentive that you guys asked me to create for them is attractive to them.
So the senior dispatcher will become a trainee for the new dispatchers, and there'll still be 3 police department dispatchers, in theory?
Well, no, the chief's budget that he gave to me last June didn't have dispatchers in it. But I did say that it would be a very good idea to to retain one trainers,
That's
so
what you were.
I discussed that earlier.
So can we put that in the budget then? I think the public, what I gathered, wants to see uniforms and boots on the ground. And they're all afraid that by a dispatcher being in the office, or not in the office, that a uniform has to go into the office. And that risks safety.
We actually tried that during the furlough. The police staff that were furloughed were dispatchers. And as I understand it, uniformed officers took their place for that period of time. And nothing happened. The city continued to function. There wasn't a great increase in crime or anything like that. So I think our fears are overblown about what might happen if we lose 3 dispatchers. I really do. I would much rather have 3 uniformed officers who can be used in a variety of roles.
Well,
Dispatching when needed.
To go on a police call, it's pretty bad if they're not answering the phone.
Going on patrols, for example. That would be my preference, to have uniformed officers in place. But, you know,
I mean, I don't feel like an incident in my apartment building where we had much like the one was talking with the healthcare worker, person that had some emotional problems, and they had to talk him out of the apartment. And I was talking to the officers who did a fantastic job. They said there was only 4 officers on duty, and 3 of them were there. That meant there was 1 police officer, city police officer, to cover the entire city of Plattsburgh if something happened. And I've been in situations where, correct me if I'm wrong, safety in numbers. The more uniforms, the safer it is for everybody. And if you're on an officer and you're out on a call and you're by yourself, that's not as good as when you're there with 2 others. And 4 police officers for the city of Plattsburgh seems pretty low.
Well, there's 4 shifts, approximately 44, 46 officers, about 11 people per shift. Some of them are detectives, etc. Some of them are corporals or supervisors. I don't think in any case there's 4 public safety officers on duty, only on duty at any one time, no.
4 uniformed patrolmen, that's what I was told that day.
No.
Union man's here.
No.
How many uniforms are on patrol on the city?
If it's a day shift, you got 4 patrolmen on the road, you got a supervisor and a dispatcher that's sitting at the desk.
For the whole day?
For the day shift.
What's that, 9 to 5?
7 in the morning till 7 at night. At nighttime it does switch and there's more people on nights, but that's accounting for no one's on vacation, no one's sick, no one's teaching in an academy, whatever else, job duties there is.
So there's 4.
On day shift, there, the max that would be on the road would be 4.
For the entire city?
And if you go below 3, you have to hire for overtime. Which we did during the furlough period. We had to hire for overtime to cover that extra spot.
So you furloughed somebody, then you had to bring somebody in on time and a half to cover for them?
Or double time, depending on the day.
Or double time?
Yes. Depending on the staffing for the day.
Some will do better to keep one person on.
So, not to interrupt.
Yeah.
Do we need to moving on, do we need to open, we recess the public hearing?
We closed it, we opened up again and there was nobody who wanted to speak.
There's no one in the lobby, or there's no one out there.
Well,
We're not quite finished the agenda yet. We still have public comment to do tonight, by the way.
I'd love to move on to public comment.
Yeah, I've got to go.
Yeah.
I do, I have a family, I've got to go.
Any other additional new business or council reports? Any closing public comments from the public of any sort?
Ethan, the man on the spot.
No? Motion to adjourn? Moved by Councilor McFarland, second by Councilor Brody. Roll call.
Councilor Bartmel?
You gave a big thumbs up on that, Ben.
Yes? Councilor Kelly?
Yes.
Councilor Gibbs?
Yes.
Councilor Brody?
Yes.
Councilor McFarland?
Yeah.
Council Moore?
Yes.